All right, strap in, everyone, because today we are diving deep into one of the most talked about trials in American history.
Oh, absolutely. This one's a doozy.
Yeah, it's the O.J. Simpson case.
A story that just seems to capture the imagination, even decades later.
It does. It really does. And I think part of that is, you've got this beloved football star accused of a double murder.
And it's not just any murder, right? We're talking about his ex-wife and her friend brutally killed.
Right, exactly. And it all plays out against this backdrop of like simmering racial tensions in 1990s LA.
Absolutely. I mean, you can't talk about this case without talking about race.
And you can't talk about it without talking about celebrity and the media.
It was like the perfect storm of all these different elements colliding.
It really was. So are you ready to unpack all of this?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, so let's rewind back to 1994. The victims are Nicole Brown Simpson, OJ's ex-wife, and her friend Ron Goldman.
Found brutally murdered outside Nicole's condo.
And the evidence? Well, let's just say it's pretty incriminating.
Yeah, the prosecution had a mountain of evidence in this case. Right. You know, they found OJ's blood at the crime scene, Nicole's blood in his car.
And that's really hard to explain away.
Right. It's like forensics 101.
Yeah.
You know? That kind of exchange of trace evidence is incredibly difficult to dispute.
And then there's that whole thing with the bloody glove, right?
Oh, the glove.
Yeah, the one found at OJ's house. It seemed like such a slam dunk for the prosecution at first.
It did. But then comes that unforgettable moment in court.
When OJ tries it on and it appears too tight.
And Johnny Cochran, OJ's lead attorney, delivers that line that will forever be etched in our memories.
If the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit.
Pure courtroom brilliance, right?
Oh, it was so smart.
Such a simple concept, but so powerful. It cut through all the complexities of DNA evidence and planted that seed of doubt.
And it wasn't just a courtroom strategy, it became this huge cultural phenomenon.
People were saying it everywhere.
Oh yeah, it was like a catchphrase.
Mm-hmm.
It really shows you the power of language and how it can impact public perception.
Absolutely. But some might argue that it was a manipulative tactic, playing the race card a little too strongly.
That's a really good point, because did that ultimately serve the pursuit of justice, or did it just muddy the waters?
That's a question that continues to spark debate, even to this day. It really makes you think about the ethics of legal strategy, right?
It does. It really does. And speaking of key players, we can't forget about Marcia Clark, the lead prosecutor.
Oh, Marcia Clark facing immense pressure to secure a conviction.
And it wasn't just pressure from the case itself, right?
No, she faced intense scrutiny from the media.
They were relentless about her appearance, her demeanor, just constantly criticizing her.
It was a stark example of the double standards that women often face in high-profile positions.
Absolutely. And it's a shame that even in a courtroom where the focus should be on justice, these biases can creep in.
Yeah, it's a reminder that the legal system isn't immune to the prejudices of society.
But back to the defense's strategy, they didn't just focus on the glove, right?
Oh no, they used race as a central theme in their case.
They argued that OJ was being targeted by a racist LAPD.
And you can't forget the historical context of this trial. We're just 2 years after the LA riots, sparked by the acquittal of the officers who beat Rodney King.
So racial tensions were already at a boiling point in Los Angeles.
Absolutely. So the defense was tapping into a very raw nerve in the city and in the nation, really.
They were portraying OJ as a victim of a system that was rigged against black men.
And that narrative resonated with a lot of people, especially in the black community.
So now imagine you're sitting on that jury. You've got all this physical evidence.
But then you also have this compelling story of racial bias being woven into the defense's arguments.
I mean, talk about a complex situation. It had to have been incredibly difficult to weigh all of those factors.
There's a collision of narratives, right?
Right.
And it forced everyone, the jury, the public, to confront some really uncomfortable truths about race and justice.
And how we perceive truth itself.
Exactly. It challenged our assumptions and exposed just how deeply ingrained biases can be.
So we have this riveting trial unfolding, a celebrity defendant, a brutal crime.
And all of this against a backdrop of deep-seated racial tensions.
The world is watching, everyone's waiting for the verdict.
And when it finally comes,
It sends shockwaves across the nation.
welcome back. It's amazing how we're still talking about this case all these years later.
It's true. It's like the OJ trial never really ended. It just kind of morphed into something else.
Right. It became part of our cultural DNA.
So last time we talked about how the defense, they used the glove, they played the race card.
Yeah, it was a brilliant legal strategy. But was there really enough evidence to convict OJ?
That's the question, right? I mean, the prosecution thought so.
They had a pretty strong case, built on forensics. and the history of abuse
Yeah,
allegations.
yeah, let's not forget about that.
It's a crucial part of the story because it speaks to a potential motive.
Well, and it shows a pattern of behavior, right?
Absolutely. You have the police reports, the 911 calls from Nicole, even photos of her injuries.
So it wasn't just a one-time thing?
No, there's a history of violence,
Right.
and the prosecution was trying to use that to establish a pattern.
Okay, so we've got the physical evidence, we've got the abuse allegations. It seems like a pretty damning case.
It does, but the defense was incredibly skilled at poking holes in the prosecution's case, creating that all-important reasonable doubt.
And they were good, right? They were really good.
Oh yeah, they were masters of their craft.
Yeah.
And the glove moment, brilliant. But were there other cracks in the prosecution's case?
Oh, there were a few. I mean, the LAPD's handling of the evidence was definitely questionable.
Yeah, there were questions about whether the crime scene was properly secured, whether evidence could have been contaminated.
And then there's the whole Mark Furman situation, one of the lead detectives on the case.
Oh, the infamous Furman tapes. Those were explosive.
Can you remind everyone about those?
So basically, these recordings surface of Furman using racial slurs and bragging about planting evidence.
Oh, wow. So he's admitting to misconduct on tape.
It was a disaster for the prosecution.
I mean, it completely undermined their credibility, right?
Exactly. It allowed the defense to paint this picture of a corrupt LAPD willing to frame OJ to get a conviction.
And remember, this is just a couple of years after the Rodney King beating and the LA riots.
So the city was already on edge, already sensitive to issues of police brutality and racial injustice.
And the defense was able to tap into that, to create this narrative of OJ as a victim.
It was incredibly effective. I mean, how can you ignore that context, especially if you're a juror trying to decide someone's fate?
It must have been a lot to process.
It was a perfect storm, you know? A charismatic defendant, a top-notch defense team, a racially charged atmosphere, and a prosecution that made some mistakes.
So even though the evidence might have seemed pretty clear at first,
The defense was able to create enough doubt to sway the jury.
and we can't forget about the power of celebrity in all of this.
Oh, absolutely. OJ was an icon, a beloved football star.
And that had to have played a role in how he was perceived, right?
Of course, it creates a certain level of sympathy, maybe even a subconscious bias.
So it makes you wonder, does fame actually shield you from accountability? Or does it make you a bigger target?
That's a question that's been debated for centuries, right? The power of fame, the burden of fame.
And the OJ case brought that debate to the forefront in a really powerful way.
But amidst all this drama, we can't forget about the victims.
Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman.
Their lives were tragically cut short, and their stories often get lost in the OJ narrative.
You're right. We need to remember that these were real people with families and friends who loved them.
Nicole was a mother of two, trying to build a new life after escaping an abusive relationship.
And Ron was a young man with his whole future ahead of him.
And their families, they had to endure not only the loss, but the public spectacle of the trial.
And then to see the man they believe responsible acquitted, I can't imagine how painful that must have been.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But their fight for justice didn't end there, you know?
Oh, right, because OJ was found not guilty in the criminal trial, but there was also a civil trial.
That's a key distinction, right?
Can you explain the difference?
So, in a criminal trial, the burden of proof is higher. The prosecution has to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
But in a civil trial, it's a lower standard.
Right. The plaintiff just has to prove that it's more likely than not that the defendant is liable.
So in the civil case, the families of Nicole and Ron were suing OJ for wrongful death.
They were seeking financial compensation for their loss.
And what was the outcome of that trial?
In a stunning turn of events, OJ was found liable.
So even though he was acquitted in the criminal case, he was held responsible in the civil case.
It was a major victory for the families, though, of course, no amount of money can truly compensate for the loss of a loved one.
But it shows that the pursuit of justice can take many forms, and sometimes one avenue is more successful than another.
And this case really highlighted how powerful narratives can be, especially when it comes to shaping public perception.
The media played a huge role in all of this, right?
They were shaping the story with their coverage, choosing what to emphasize, how to frame events.
And it was nonstop coverage.
Oh yeah, it was 24/7 OJ. It was like the birth of reality TV in a way.
But with real-life consequences.
And that raises questions about the media's responsibility, right? When does coverage become excessive? When does it start to influence the outcome of a trial?
It's a slippery slope, for sure. So we've talked about the evidence, the legal strategy, the media frenzy, the impact of race and celebrity.
Well, what about the bigger picture? What did the OJ trial teach us about ourselves,
Yeah.
about society?
That's the real question, isn't it? And that's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
We're going to look at the lasting legacy of this case and how it continues to shape our understanding of justice, race, and the media.
Man, it's wild, right? We've really gone deep on this one.
We have, haven't we? From the crime scene to the courtroom, the media frenzy, the verdict. It's like we've lived through it all over again.
Yeah. It is crazy how, even after all this time, people are still so captivated by the OJ case.
It's true. It really is. And I think it's because it wasn't just a trial. It was this major cultural moment.
Yeah, it definitely exposed some serious cracks in a lot of
In
things.
society, in the justice system, in the media.
Exactly. So we've spent a lot of time breaking down the trial itself, but I want to talk about the bigger picture. What kind of lasting impact did this case have on America?
Well, I think you can't underestimate how it changed the way we consume news.
Oh, for sure. This was like the dawn of the 24/7 news cycle, right?
Exactly. The OJ trial was a major turning point. It kind of ushered in this era of, like, infotainment, where ratings became more important than responsible reporting.
Yeah, it's like it paved the way for reality TV, but with real life stakes.
And you can't deny that constant stream of images and opinions had an effect on people.
Oh, totally. It created this culture of instant analysis and speculation where everyone had a take and they had to share it right away.
And it made people wonder about the media's role.
Mm.
How much were they shaping public perception? Could they even be influencing the outcome of the trial?
Those are big questions, and it doesn't seem like we've really figured out the answers yet.
Not really. And then there's the impact on the legal system itself.
Yeah.
Did the OJ case change how justice is served in America?
It definitely sparked a huge conversation about race and the justice system.
I mean, the defense's whole strategy revolved around exposing racial bias within the LAPD, and that resonated with a lot of people, especially in the Black community.
It forced everyone to confront the fact that justice isn't always blind, right? That things like race, class, even celebrity can influence the outcome.
And the OJ case became this symbol of how those factors can create an uneven playing field. It made people question whether everyone really does have equal access to justice.
So you could say the trial was a wake-up call for America.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. It exposed the deep racial tensions and inequalities that still exist in our society.
And it showed how powerful narratives can be, how they shape public opinion and influence the way things play out.
It's amazing how one trial could have such a ripple effect.
It really is. It touched on so many aspects of American life. So after all of this, after diving into the evidence, the legal strategies, the media circus, the impact of race and celebrity, what can we learn? What can we take away from all of this?
I think one of the biggest lessons is the importance of critical thinking. We can't just accept things at face value. We need to be able to dissect information, consider different perspectives.
Especially in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with information from all sides.
Exactly. We have to be discerning consumers of news. We have to question the narratives we're being presented with.
Be aware of our own biases too and how they might be coloring our understanding of things.
Absolutely. And I think it's also crucial to remember the human cost of this whole ordeal.
You're talking about the victims, Nicole and Ron?
Yeah, beyond the legal battles, beyond the media frenzy, there were real people whose lives were tragically cut short.
And families who are still living with the pain of their loss, a loss that was made even more difficult by the public nature of the trial and the controversial verdict.
It's a reminder that behind every headline, behind every courtroom drama, there are real people whose lives have been forever changed.
And that's something we should never forget.
Never. So we've gone from a brutal crime scene to a courtroom showdown to a media spectacle that still resonates today.
The O.J. Simpson trial was a pivotal point in American history. It challenged us, it exposed our flaws, and it forced us to confront some hard truth about ourselves and the systems we rely on.
And it's a story that'll continue to fascinate us, I think, because it speaks to these universal themes of truth, justice, the power of race and celebrity, and the search for meaning in a world where it's often hard to find.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a journey, but I think it's been a valuable one.
I agree, and I hope it's encouraged you to keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep searching for the truth, no matter how complex or uncomfortable it might be.
Until next time, keep an open mind. And remember, there's always more to the story.